Redditors who had sex with someone from a completely different culture. What is your funniest/weirdest story? I like to think I'm a good kisser, had a compliment here and there, and one time I was making out with this Chinese guy whose English I thought was pretty great, but he breaks off in the middle of kissing and just says you're so hardier than a peach. And goes right back to making out again. Hey, I'll take it. Whatever he meant. Had pretty wild with a Mexican girl I met in Berlin. She was staying in the same hotel as me, and we hit it off. On the night we'd both had quite a few drinks, and she was very much the instigator of the intercourse. I woke up and had bite marks and scratches on my body. She woke up and said I have to go to church right now, thank you for the please leave. We both got dressed in silence, and I went back to my room. I saw her later that day, and she ignored me. Then later that night, there was a knock at my door. She used me twice and bailed on me to go to church both times. Probably felt the need for confession. I'm sure this is a common one, but the first time having with a Korean man, he told me to kiss his dragon. I nearly busted out laughing. As a Korean man, I could not say that with a straight face. So I was in the Philippines and was staying with my cousins. I'm half Pinoy, grew up in the US, in this little village. I met this pretty girl a few houses down and we started talking. Nothing happened. The next day a local friend and I went to a club, or a what the Pinoy call the disco, about 15 minutes away. I met this girl there again. Again we started talking, and when we were all partied out and drunk, we shared a taxi back to the village. She invited me to her place, we played Jenga and had a little. Now, here's the weird part. A couple weeks later I found out that she was my cousin. Turns out my grandpa got around with half the village in his day. I lost my virginity to my cousin. As things were getting started, he leaned in close to me and said in English, not his native tongue, I think it's maybe not very polite to say. And maybe weird. But I want your brains out. That's a thing people say, right? Afterward I reported that he had in fact managed to my brains out, which he seemed happy with. Bonus story, while trying to woo me earlier he looked up at the moon and said it'd be cool to travel there. I agreed, and he asked, so is that on your Craigslist? Makes me laugh every time I remember it. Also, only a small percentage of people that watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you end up enjoying this video, consider subscribing with notification on, it's free, and you can always change your mind later. I had with an Iraqi man one day. We had been flirting for quite a while, but I believe his cultural background prevented him from really taking it any further. Then on the day in question apparently he decided he didn't care anymore. We made out, clothes are coming off, and I'm surprised, almost shocked, at the size of his. Much bigger than I anticipated. We had a total of 5 times that night. Worst of my life. He had this weird way of like bringing his legs up so his knees were kinda jammed in my ribcage. After the 5th time, he lightly slapped me across the face, told me to shut up, and then told me he loved me. Nope, directly the out of there, and haven't seen him since. Just a really weird, unsatisfying experience. I'm still trying to figure out how a position where he brings his knees up so that they're jamming your ribcage is feasible. Or why he thought that would be a good idea. Oh, I'm late to the party. I was in the Philippines, asked a girl out in a date, she agreed, and we end up having. I wake up the next morning, she is getting dresses, and says I owe her money for the. I told her hell no, and she pulls a knife, and then I realized I do owe her money. Edit, I was freaked out, I just gave her everything I had. The scary part was after I gave her everything she didn't move from in front of the door, so I grabbed her purse on the bed and threw it out the window. When she ran to the window I ran like Forrest Gump. I am Indo-Canadian. I hooked up with a Franco-Ontarian, bilingual French-Canadian, for a few weeks once. He was the nicest guy ever with the cutest accent and beard. He asked me if I wanted him to talk dirty to me in French, and I said yes. Slowly I started talking mushy to him in Hindi. Most intense ever. He made me French toast with maple syrup too in the mornings. Does a straight man sleeping with a woman who was 99% lesbian count? I guess I fell into the tiny little range of men she was into. I might have been the one guy in that range. She was not at all interested in handling my junk and repeatedly said she thought wands are funny. But PIV was fun for both of us. The only other funny bit was when I asked aloud if I needed to use a condom since she is a lesbian. I guess my horny mind forgot that all women can get pregnant, even those that aren't usually into dudes. Geez, I got put in my place. Well, kinda. Not really. Anyways, I was dating a lady from a hardcore Mexican background. Like, grandma was Mamalito and only spoke Spanish. It was a house full of women. Aunts, daughters, grandma, me on occasion. Well, one day I went over for my first dinner ever there and basically just sat around, being doted on and not moving from my chair for anything while my GF and her family did everything else. I didn't even fill my own glass. At the end of the dinner I demanded to do the dishes. My ma woulda hated me forever if I didn't. I get to a pan that is pretty stuck on, so I take a fork to it to scrape it a little bit, and everyone gets on my tail and forces me to sit down and relax. I found out later that Mamalito had said, while escorting my pasty to the couch, that the reason women do everything in the house is because men don't know how to do. GF said it was the only time she had ever heard her grandma swear. Also, this was almost a decade ago. I no longer scratch pans with a fork. I'm a white American dude, but I've mostly been dating Latinas for the last 5 years. I would say the funniest thing that happened was when I had a one-night stand with an Ecuadorian girl in Buenos Aires. At the time my Spanish was okay, but certain slang didn't quite register, or I was just too literal with translations. We met at a club on my birthday, got some champagne, and then went back to her place. It was like 8 in the morning, and we were having on her couch in her apartment. She was on top of me, and I was trying to say let's do doggy style, and said estilo de perro, and she looked at me, squinted slightly, and then shook her head Logan like I was the biggest idiot ever. She gave me a playful smack on the face and said, normalmente se dice ponerse de cuatro hermoso idiota, or normally we just say get on all fours you handsome idiot. As an American college student, I found out that Swedish girls definitely seem to curse in Swedish when it was really hot and made me want to make it happen as often as possible. It was like speaking in tongues. Gay guy here. Up with a native Emirati when I visited Abu Dhabi. In messaging back and forth before hooking up I was curious, so I asked what it was like being gay in the UAE. He replied, ha ha ha. I'm not gay. I'm a top. That one reply gave me a huge insight into how gays are looked at in the UAE. Guys are free to do a lot with other guys without being considered gay, but the moment you're on the receding end of then you're gay. Lady Canadian here. A Turkish boyfriend only wanted, I wasn't interested. I don't think he came once. Chinese boyfriend at age 35 was proud to show me his first chest hair before we started the bangathon. Edit, forgot the Persian. Mostly had only kissed white boys before I met him. I could not get used to the plump lips. It was like kissing worms. My Bahamian friend mostly dates white men and she complains about their flat lips. Turkish boyfriend needed a boyfriend. My ex-fiancé was British. He told me to go on to sleep after we had, and that he'd knock me up in the morning. I looked at him like he grew 4 eyes and he said, oh, yeah, that means something that we don't want to happen here in America. I meant wake you up. That's weird. I'm British and knocking someone up means exactly what you think it means. I had a fling with an Israeli man once. He was very serious during like right to business, very intense and sultry. I'm more silly, giggling and talking a bit. He did say he liked it and had never experienced fun, silly. Who knows, I wasn't the first American girl he had, maybe I was the least mature. Also, we were sharing a room with others he wanted to have all over the place and wanted to leave the condoms around. Clearly I allowed no part of the latter and cleaned up afterwards. I was dating an Indian guy. OMG, he's so stupid handsome, it's ridiculous. Anyway, he's concerned about being uncircumcised, but I didn't care. I was giving him head, and he was clearly enjoying it, yay me. And when he got close to he suddenly shouted, if you keep going like that I'm going to do the deed. I almost choked on his from trying not to laugh at the phrasing. Great most of the time, and he's a generally nice person. We had a nice time together for a couple of months, but he is utterly unreliable and kind of selfish, so we ended that. I met a Chilean girl in a local bar in my hometown. We hit it off great, and the first date we had it was right down to business after dinner/concert. In the morning she is laying next to me, still sleeping, and I notice her back ratio is different than I ever saw. My first encounter with a Latina woman. I fully studied it, and was looking fascinated at her. All of a sudden she wakes up and sees me lurking at her. She kind of freaked out, but I talked my way out of it. We are a half-year married now, and this event took place over 4 years ago. I still call it her hill, and I love it. My first date with this guy from the Middle East wasn't funny. It was weird. During the date, he patted my stomach and said he couldn't wait to put a bun, read child, in it. He was serious. Needless to say, that was my first and last date with him. I was having with my Japanese girlfriend, now wife, in my 18th floor hotel room in Yokohama. During the deed, I felt a shake and I thought I was hitting it right. Then it dawned on me, it was an earthquake. I immediately jumped up from bed and grabbed our stuff, running around the room like a lunatic. She laughed and said, "It's okay, it's a small one." I looked down at my. Then we laughed and laughed and laughed. Ah, good times.